Hey, I'm Todd from Newport Vessels. Today we are launching the brand new NK180 electric kayak motor. And before we get started installing it on this Recon 120 from Wilderness Systems, I'm going to run through what comes in the kit. All right, so when you receive the NK180 kit, first and foremost here we have the aluminum motor mount with quick release bracket. We have the steering triangle, motor lift arm, the adjustment collar, the reverse lock line, the motor lift line, the fixed position pin, the steering cable kit, the electronic throttle control with magnetic stop key, the tools and mounting hardware for the aluminum bracket, and last but not least, the brand new NK180 electric kayak motor. We've got an all metal housing here, both saltwater and freshwater compatible. We've got a replaceable skeg here, so if you hit something, you can replace it, no problem. We've got about 6 foot of cable here off the NK180. It should accommodate most boats, but we also have the extension if you need to have it a little longer for your boat installation. So the very first thing we're going to do here is mount the motor bracket, and you're going to need these tools and parts to make this happen. So with this Wilderness Systems kayak, you'll notice that there are no inserts here where the power poles are usually mounted. So we're going to have to drill holes to mount this motor bracket. So one of the most important things about mounting this bracket is making sure that it's on the center line of the boat. That will make sure the performance of the motor and tracking is perfect. So what we're going to do is line it up on the center here, and we're going to use the Sharpie to mark the holes. Okay, so once you have the bracket marked, it's time to drill the holes. Okay, so we drill the holes. Now it's time to mount the motor bracket. You can do it by yourself, but you know what? I prefer to have some helping hands. So Josh is going to help me today here. So let's go ahead and get this in position. So just remember that it's important that under the bolt you have the first washer, the small washer, then underneath the kayak, up against the plastic material, you have the fender washer, then you have the lock washer, and then you have the nut. Josh, you want to go ahead and grab those bolts and slide them in there? So one of the things that you notice is the fender washer here. It doesn't come with the kit, but you might want to add this to the installation to really spread the load over the back of the kayak. And once you get those on, I'll use the hex tool here to tighten them up. This is where it's nice to have second hand. All right. Okay, just snug that down. All right, so once you have all of the bolts in there and snug down, we're gonna seat them. So we want to do just like you do on a car tire. We're gonna snug them down diagonally from each other here. Make sure they're nice and tight and snug. One more, and the motor bracket is installed. All right, so once you have the motor bracket installed, it's time to put the adjustable motor mount back on the bracket. All right, the next step in the installation process is actually mounting the motor to the bracket here and also attaching the steering triangle. And here are the parts you're going to need for this section. We need the NK180 motor, the motor lift arm, two 10mm box end wrenches, height adjustment collar, and the steering triangle. So on this Wilderness Systems, we're going to want to put the steering triangle below the motor mount here because our lines are in lower position here on the boat. One little tip here, when you're installing the steering triangle, make sure you remove the bolts. It'll make the process a lot easier. The first thing you want to do is put your throttle control cable through, followed up by your battery cables. And you want to keep working the steering triangle almost toward the bottom here, so we've got plenty of room to make that adjustment back up. Now that we've got the steering triangle in place, you notice the V is toward the back. That's a very important piece here. And now we're going to thread it up through the quick release bracket. One of the things that will really help at this point is uninstalling the quick release bracket and placing it right on the motor here. You want to make sure that the cables go through the bottom. So we'll grab the battery and the throttle control cables, slide them through here. And then slide it all the way down to the bottom. You can set the unit down, and now we're going to grab the adjustment collar and install that. On a motor height adjustment collar, you'll want to take out the boat as well, so you can make sure you get the throttle cable through here. Just get it on there, just slide it on down. So the next thing to go on is the motor lift arm. And as you notice here, there are two different size holes. So the smaller hole goes into the height adjustment collar, like this. So once you have the motor lift arm installed, what you want to do is snug it up with the 10mm wrench to make sure when you put the motor in the bracket, it doesn't fall to the ground. Now we got it nice and snug there. Now we're going to set the motor into the bracket. All right, slide it right in, and then gently set that down. Now that we've got the motor lift arm attached and the steering triangle almost in position, you want to make sure that they're centered on the boat and centered on the motor. That's very important. So at this stage of the installation, you're going to need the wire steering cables, the carabiners, the aluminum ferrules, and the crimpers. So let's talk about the steering cable kit. It's got a nice large diameter, very robust. It's coated. However, with the Wilderness Systems boat, the diameter of our cable will not fit through the steering tubes, so we're going to have to use the included cable that came with the rudder kit. Okay, now it's time to run the steering lines from the back of the boat here to the front. So now that we have the steering cables run all the way to the front, we have connected our steering line to the carabiner with a Duncan loop, one of my favorites. If you're using the supplied cables from Newport vessels, you'll just connect the carabiner to this pre-assembled loop here. So the next part of the process is to take the carabiners here and connect it to the steering triangle. You want to start with the outside holes. This will give you the most sensitive steering. You can always adjust it later, but that's where we're going to start out. And you want to make sure that you close the barrel connection on the carabiner as well. It's time to connect it to our sliding pedal system. We've removed the static system on this kayak, and so we're going to set this aside. So the first thing you want to do is slide the pedals all the way to the front in this kayak and any kayak that you really have that you're going to set up. So it's going to be key that you look at the position of the foot pedals and push them all the way to the front. So we've got the pedal system pushed all the way to the front. Now it's time to take the steering line and run it through the hole here on the pedal system. So once you pull up the slack here, what you're going to want to do is pull the steering control all the way to the left as far as you can so it hits a stop, and that will be in the perfect position for you to tie off the steering cable to the pedal system here. So a little tip here, when you're trying to get the steering set up so the pedal doesn't slide, use a pair of vice grips and keep it in position right here. We're going to go ahead and tie an overhand knot here, nice and tight, secure. If you're using our supplied cable steering, you want to make sure that you grab one of these ferrules out of the package, slide it onto the cable, make a nice loop, and slide the wire back through the ferrule, making sure that you have a nice tight loop and connection to your steering device. And then go ahead and crimp the ferrule nice and tight. And if you want to add a second ferrule, feel free. We have it on the other end, so it'll make a nice tight connection for you on your steering system. And now we'll be ready to connect the steering line to the starboard side pedal system. Just softly tighten up the vice grips, just enough to hold them. Now we've got the steering system connected. As you can see, the pedals move back and forth. Now we're going to cut the tag in. You want to leave a little bit left for the final tuning on the water. Leave a good amount. Just cut it off. Now that we've run the steering, the next section in the installation is running the motor lift line and the reverse lock line. So here we go. We need the motor lift line, reverse lock line, and the two handles. Now first we're going to run the motor lift. So you want to clip it here on the motor lift arm. And as you can see down here, we've got two eyelets, and also the tubing here on the wilderness system are going to run all the way to the front, and then we're going to run it through an eye we've installed and then attach the handle to it as well. All right, we've got the motor lift line coming out of the tubing here, so we're going to pull it tight, make sure it's clear and no obstructions in the back. And depending on what kayak you have, the placement of this, you can put it wherever you'd like. So what we want to do is we're going to thread on the handle here. Okay, you want to pull this through, and you're going to want to leave 8 to 10 inches from the front of your seat here, and then tie a simple overhand knot or two to secure the handle onto the motor lift line. All right, so now we're going to connect the reverse lock line. We're going to connect the S-hook here to the pre-assembled loop, and we're going to run it through the eyelet here and then the tubing on the kayak. Okay, we've got the reverse lock line run through our eyelet here, and now just one little key is to make sure you just pull and stretch the line. These cords stretch a little bit, so we want to make sure we get that out of there, let it relax. And then again, as we did on the motor lift line, we want to leave 8 to 10 inches from the eyelet here or wherever you'd like to position it. So we're going to go ahead and attach the handle now. Leave a little bit of tag in there. Pull it tight. You've got your reverse lock line installed. Now we're going to hook up the electrical. We're going to start. We've got dropped in a crate here. We've got a pair of 12-volt deep cycle batteries in series, so we've got a 24-volt system. Let's get this hooked up. Okay, here we need a kayak crate, or battery box, a 24-volt power system, either two 12-volt deep cycle batteries or 24-volt system. If you're using two 12-volt batteries, use a short cable to connect them in series. Okay, we're going to route the battery cables through the bottom of the crate so it looks super clean. And we'll reposition these, and we'll probably zip tie them up to the side, make it nice and neat. But now we're going to connect the red to the positive terminal and the black to the negative terminal. And now we've got it tight, both terminals, the red on the positive and the black on the negative. Now that we have our battery cables connected to our 24-volt system, it's time to run the throttle control cable to the front. Here we go. We're at the final step of the installation. We're going to finish running the power cord for the throttle to the front of the boat, and we're going to hook up the throttle controller. Here we need the throttle controller, the magnetic stop key, and a rail mount platform to mount the controller to. So today, for mounting the throttle controller to the GPS mount here, we're using a heavy-duty Velcro. It'll make it super simple, easy to mount. You don't have to worry about the threaded fasteners. There also are opportunities to use threaded fasteners if you'd like to for this application. Okay, now that we've got the cable run here to the throttle controller, we're going to mount it with the Velcro to the GPS mount. We've got the throttle controller mounted. Now all we have left to do is attach the magnetic stop key. Once you add the magnetic stop key, just press the power button to reset the motor and activate the controller. So you want to make sure we've got the deep cycle batteries here, that the mode on the battery says D for the deep cycle batteries. Now we're ready to hit the water.